So, this is, yeah, maybe generate. I mean, in some ways, this is a struggle in the aging field in general, because the generation of leaders that included Claude Pepper and Maggie Kuhn and Wilbur Cohen and Bob Ball and, you know, the Arthur Fleming, they're gone. So should we try to create more sort of charismatic leadership because we all want somebody to follow, or maybe we mature in a different way, and that in fact the leaders are sitting in this room, which has always scared me a little bit that I'm part of that. But so I think that's part of the issue, but I think it comes back to, so we talked about sort of the legacy of a charismatic leader and a charismatic organization, and Maggie, in some ways the challenges of the Grey Panthers were built into the design of the organization, because there was so much concern about bureaucracy that they didn't call them chapters. I think they're still called networks. They're called networks. They didn't have a president and a vice president. They had conveners. And so in many ways, the idea was to keep it as a non-organization. And I think after she's gone, it needs to be an organization with some structure and ability to continue on. And so there are those issues in play as well. What kind of organizational structure is needed to foster the kind of spirit that you want to be a part of, but that can have real impact? And that's something that's, I don't know that you can't sustain a charismatic movement. It needs to evolve into something else. And that's what we're struggling with.
On the other hand, I mean, we really couldn't have been given a better scene. I mean, as terrible as it is, I mean, we couldn't have a better time for some kind of leader, or at least for the, and it may well be that the leadership isn't about a person, but it's more organizational, more movement. You know, I mean, basically, we are about now dealing with the undoing of the social safety net. We are undoing the New Deal. I mean, that has been the agenda of the right ever since Social Security came in, and we are seeing it here now, and we are confronted. I mean, we have these discussions all the time, not necessarily in the context of the leader, but the fact that the right has been so much more strategic, in my view, in terms of making sure they're dealing with state legislatures, they're dealing with the courts. I mean, look at the Supreme Court we have right now. I mean, most people you talk to, they're going to undo, and may well undo, health care. And if they listen to some of the arguments that are being made against the health care reform, Medicaid, Medicare programs are next. So we are facing the biggest battle we could be facing. I agree, we need a Maggie, but we don't have one. So we have us. We are presented, though, with an issue that is about as right on in terms of our politics as you could ever imagine. So, yeah.
I just had a thought, which is, you know, why not go forward with the old teach-in model, like next year's ASA conference? Either have a pre-conference session or a 1 or 2 day workshop, and it's the Grizzly Panthers / Maggie Kuhn Institute. And we bring in people from the Action Coalition for Media Education. We bring in people to do public speaking training. You know, I actually think we're sort of up here on content. I mean, it's a fabulous content conference, but we're not doing social change. We're not training leaders, and we've got leaders, and you could be the next person. You know, everyone in this room could be, but that would be, I think, and maybe not just here, do it at regional events. God knows, GSA, I have no clue, but you know, there's regional things. You get a little bit of money and you do the teach-ins and you build stuff.
Yes. Thank you. I'm Dr. Carroll Orsborn from boomerinfluence.com. So I'm a social networking pioneer. We're mobilizing boomer women online, and there's plenty of us. We're the largest and fastest growing segment on WebMD, Facebook, Yahoo, we've got our own community, vibrantnation.com. You know, I think if we use the old ways of trying to mobilize people without going online, it's not going to work. But we're there, and this is our time. So the question, I really have a question. This is not just a call to action, although it is a call to action. But what I really want to know is there something about the boomer generation? Was there something about that time and place and that generation that worked to create an ethos that would create a Maggie Kuhn and all these other people that is lacking now? You know, why hasn't this happened yet? And or is the critical mass about to happen? Are we just sort of waking up out of denial en masse because, oh my gosh, the worst is really happening?
All of the above.
I think you've stumped.
There was a question in there, which is whether the boomer generation can rise.
Was it a cohort, a particular, that's the only word I know that.
Yes, that's fine.
I mean, cohort, was it that cohort that particularly
Right.
was unique? I don't know, do you think?
What is the audience? What do you all think? We'd like to hear from you. Yes.
I'm Gloria Noodleman. I'm a student in gerontology at San Francisco State University. It's an honor to meet you, Dr. Estes. And you voiced, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said just her.
Well, I've read her book. I haven't read your book.
Look, you gotta have a strong ego to be in it.
And I don't have a mustache. You voiced a lot of what's going on in my brain, and I don't really have a question. But you voiced a lot of it. I watched the revolution in Wisconsin on Twitter because it wasn't in the mainstream news. I kept looking at the New York Times. Where is it? Where is it? And on Twitter, you could watch the occupation of the Capitol on people's cell phones. And it was so deeply moving because I'm a child of the 60s, and there were these young people with their drums and their energy, and it was just so enlivening and so beautiful. So the internet changes everything, you know, and we're seeing it in the Middle East, and we're seeing it in our country. And so that's my non-question. And also, how can we connect with labor? Because the triumph of Wisconsin was a triumph of labor, and we boomers have got to connect with labor to get, you know, for numbers and money and focus.
We're from Wisconsin. We get to speak.
I mean, we're almost. I'll get to. I just want to make sure I get something out. In the sense of advocacy right now, one of the things that is going on is the attempt to block grant Medicaid, which is in many ways a gigantic issue in terms of low-income people. I've got a paper that the National Senior Citizens Law Center did that I want to hand out. I'll hand it out just so it's up here if you want it afterwards. But it would be a way. I mean, I've always found it's hard, and Maggie knew, to organize in the abstract. And this is just one issue. But you can't just, you got to have an issue. And we've got a lot of them. And here's one of them as an example. I especially want Ashley to think about this for some work she might do. But anyway, that's after the session. I just want to tell you it's up here.
Hi, yes.
I'm Ben Snedell. I'm the Ombudsman Director in San Francisco. And I'm also from the generation of activism in the 60s and the 50s. And I want to recommend a pie chart on the real federal budget put out by War Resisters League, which is on their website. It's excellent way to kind of reframe the allocation of the federal budget. Apparently military and security spending is off the radar screen in any kind of calculation of the national deficit. Number two, the Grey Panthers strikes me as an eclectic approach. And after the 60s, we've all become specialized in certain ways where we lose that eclecticism. For instance, when I was an undergraduate at Columbia, New York, I read everything across the board. I was a real generalist. And one of my favorite books was Michael Harrington's Other America, which then led to Johnson and Kennedy policy. At that time, public policy was bipartisan. It was right down the middle. There was an area for negotiation. But it's ironic to go back to Michael Harrington's book, which he wrote in Dorothy Day's Catholic Worker. He was upstairs on a typewriter. It's so applicable today, given the pushback of all these safety net programs. So eclecticism has to lead us to read these other texts and other information.